Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Couple of Nukes. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Whiskey. And as the title suggests, we are here to learn how to be an extraordinary man. And I have with me Mr. Andrew. And we're going to start by having Mr. Andrew introduce himself. I want to thank him. Thank you personally, Andrew, for waking up before the sun over there in South Korea. It's nighttime for me, not even daytime yet for you. So I appreciate you rallying and waking up early to do this. But we're going to ask you to just tell us a little bit about yourself, a brief overview, and then tell us, what does it mean to you, masculinity? We live in a time in the world where there's a lot of newerish phrases: feminism, toxic masculinity. Those are big words being thrown around. Men's mental health, this and that. A lot of changes. There's pushes for men to be very feminine. There's pushes for, calling back what they call older masculinity. And so I'm just curious where you stand as someone who leads a network for men's mental health, your definition of masculinity.
Okay. So I'm absolutely a man's man, masculine. I'm just kidding. I don't know. I'm not even. We will go through what that means because I was gonna say I'm not even sure what that means. As I say it, I'm not sure, but we will definitely
You,
get
you
to
didn't
the
rip
core of
your
it.
shirt and show off your muscles when you said it, So if you were like, I'm a
No,
man's man, and
I
just ripped off your shirt and started
can I come
flexing.
back to you in a couple of months after
Yeah.
hitting the gym? Yeah, we'll get. Well,
Yeah.
I'll come back to that. No, yeah, my name's Andrew Michael Houghton. I'm from the UK, and I've lived in Seoul, South Korea for the last 21 years. I am a dual elite Norring coding specialist. I am an English language professor at a university in Seoul. So I do both things. I teach English and I do life coaching as well, predominantly for men in their 40s with self-esteem issues. And I'm married, got kids, very grateful for the life I have. Is there anything I've missed out in my
Oh,
introduction?
no, not at all. I'll ask you something real quick because you spoke about men primarily in their 40s who have self-esteem issues. Do you believe in midlife crisis? I know some people say that's not a real thing. That doesn't really happen. Where do you stand on that? Is midlife crisis its
Yeah.
own just phenomenon? Is it just that most people by that time are becoming empty nesters and want to
Mm.
reevaluate themselves? Or what have you personally discovered by coaching all these men, some kind of secret to the midlife crisis?
Well, I hope I'm not even anywhere near my midlife. Um, with that said,
Right.
though, I think it's changed in the last 20 years, at least in my so when I look at where my dad was when he was my age and where I am at 40, at 44, where I am and where my dad was when he was 44, it was very
Right.
different. The
Mm.
the you know the geopolitical landscape was very different, the economic situations were very different, and he was so when he was 44, I was a teenager. I'm 44 and I have a 3-year-old and a 3-month-old baby. So
Wow.
very different expectations on us.
Everything's
And
being pushed back, kind of.
yeah, it is. It feels like that. And it's just like my midlife is my peak life, if you like. If I'm
Mm.
middle aged and let's admit it, 44, like it very well could be. If I'm middle aged, then I don't have time for a crisis because I'm just started a family.
Right.
Whereas when my dad was middle aged, he was like you're saying, becoming an empty nester in a sense, and all the pressures of the day, the economy, providing for his family, is what his wife, um, their own things that they're going through were allowed to come to the surface, and he could just dwell on it all day and have a breakdown and whatever was happening. Like he could have a crisis,
Right.
right? Men at that time had time to have a crisis when they're in their late 40s. Today we live in it's different, right? There's not to mention
Right.
the issues, as you said, about toxic masculinity and femininity and whether it's okay for a man to admit his feelings and vulnerabilities and things like that. Like, should men even say if they're having a crisis? These are questions that we'll discuss.
I agree with you that it's being pushed back, and I think it's for two big reasons. I think the first one being economically, people I think are having children later in life for three reasons actually. The first being financially, it's not as easy to sustain a family at a young age as it was back then. Plus, people are getting married a lot later in life. As time has moved forward, we've moved to getting married and having a family later and later. But right now, people are barely affording rent or groceries for their own self or, whatever relationship they're in, let alone children. Children are very expensive, especially the more you have, it's kind of exponential, I feel like, unless you're, passing down and everything. But traveling has become a big thing.
Yep.
You look back in time, traveling wasn't as accessible to everyone. It wasn't as efficient, as easy. Now you have a lot of young couples who want to travel the world. They want to go to Iceland. They want to go to Asia. They want to go wherever it is. You have a lot of traveling. And so a lot of people are having children later on in life because they don't want to travel with children. They want to say,
Mm.
hey, we were setting up our careers, we were doing college. Now it's you and me time, we're newlywed or we're engaged or we're a young couple. We want to travel the world before we have kids, while we still have the money, while we're young. A lot of people saw their parents, a lot of people in my generation, and even the millennials saw their parents finally had the money and time to travel, but they were too old to enjoy it. So a lot of people are getting pushed and advised even
Yep.
by the older people, the older generations, to travel while they're young, while they can. I also believe
Yeah.
that there's a huge push on sexual immorality, and that's another reason why children are happening later in life because a lot of young women are all on birth control or taking Plan Bs left and right, and so they're not having kids, whether planned or unplanned, and so families are starting a lot later in life because it's being pushed that sex is for pleasure, not reproduction. And with the push of sexual immorality through social media, that is also pushing it back. So between that, the economy, traveling, just different mindsets, everything is being pushed back. So the midlife crisis is really no longer a midlife crisis. It's just the phase people go through perhaps when they're done having a family. But by this point, for people your age who are in their 40s just beginning to have a family, you're going to be in the retirement phase by then, by the time your kids grow up. I mean, 20 years from now, you'll be in your 60s. And most people, 65 to 70s, when they start retiring. And, you could say you're going to do whatever you were going to do in a midlife crisis, which typically is associated with stereotypically buying a new car or changing careers all of a sudden, whatever it is. It's always indicated by something like that. But part of it might be, and tying it back to you, self-esteem issues. Are you buying the new car or whatever because you got to rebrand your identity because you as a parent tied your identity to your children and being a father rather than who you are? You lost yourself. You became just a father and lost whoever, for example, Andrew or Mr. Whiskey was before they were a father. And now that your kids are off in college, who are you now? It's a crisis we see also with military members, as I've spoken on your show and other platforms. They get out, they're no longer petty officer or chief, or who are they now? And sometimes the coping mechanism for that identity crisis, which can cause self-esteem issues, is buying a new car, buying a new house,
Yep.
doing this or that.
What you're saying resonates with me completely. I was just going to add to it the idea that has been put out there recently of quarter life crisis instead of, the midlife
Mm,
crisis still exists, but a lot of people, men and women, experience a quarter life crisis first, where they went to university thinking that life was going to be one way and it was going to be this way, and they were going to graduate with this skill and get a job in this area. And by the time they graduate and spend a year outside of, in the real world, they're like, I hate this. What is this? This is not me. This is not who I want to be.
right.
And they have a lot, an existential crisis of who they thought they were and who they really are. And that's somewhat similar to what happens when people get to their midlife and empty nesting and
Right.
they lose their sense of identity. So there's more crises than we thought possibly, but they're for
I
similar
agree.
reasons.
I agree. In fact, now more than ever, we have seen the usefulness of college degrees go down the drain, the prices of college go up. Uh, almost every bartender or guitarist at a bar that I have met in my town has a college degree. Some of them questionable degrees in fields of subjects. Some of them I'm like, well, I mean, there's not a lot of jobs in that field, but some of them, like full on psychology degrees,
Yep.
microbiology, whatever, like big professional degrees, and they just can't get a job. I saw people who were going to be doctors and lawyers, and they're pouring my drinks, and so it's
Yeah.
it's
Same,
crazy.
same
And
over here. As a language teacher, we see the demand, like some of it's delusion or delusions of
mm,
grandeur for these
right,
institutions that want to hire native English speakers. They think, I mean, it's true to be a professor in a university in the UK, you should be a PhD, you should have, or at least be on your way, and you'll be what they have a term for that kind of under professor position. But in Korea, like they're advertising for a native English speaker to be an English teacher, and they require a PhD. And then you look at a
Mm.
salary, and it's like 2 grand, 2,000, $2,500 a month. It's like, you kidding me? Like, you think someone's going to go through all that hard work to get a PhD in
Right.
anything, even if it's political science, and then come over here for 2.5 grand to teach English? Like, you're out of your tree.
Right.
But then
People
again,
think
like you're saying, there actually might be people who would do that because they're so desperate for, a standard of living and,
right.
and a job.
Right. And one of the big issues is the idea tied to college degrees is college degree is instant six figures when you get out. That's a huge misconception. A college degree can result in six figures, but certainly not right off the bat, depending on the field. But especially, yeah, like you said, but at the same time, 2 grand, I mean, really undercutting. And what happens is interesting. When I went to the voice acting conference in Atlanta, a big thing they were talking about is advice to all the new voice actors is they always undercut themselves, which brings
Mm,
down the whole industry's prices. So, like you said, you have these college students who don't want to play guitar at the music bar or wherever, and they because they have a PhD, and if they see a position, hey, we'll pay 2 grand for this. Now, boom, they're going to start filling up those positions. Other colleges and universities are going to say, if they're paying only 2 grand, I can only pay 2 grand. And then what you get is a whole field of colleges and universities underpaying teachers and just wave
yeah,
after wave of people who are more desperate taking less money. And then it'll eventually result in a strike. No one's teaching at all until there's pay raises. And then the whole world,
yeah, yeah.
we've seen it happen
And
before.
and and this affects self-esteem too. It affects your self-worth. If you're not getting paid enough for the work you're doing, it affects how you value yourself. If you
Right.
and then that affects how you go into your next interview and how much you'll accept for your next job. And these things all tie into each other. That's right.
I agree. And especially in the industry of podcasting and entertainment, I go to all these conferences with podcasters and stuff, and there's so much comparison to just these like the top 5% or these top five. I think even with men and with dating too, a lot of women have this expectation, and that expectation is like the top 5% of men. I had an
Yeah.
interview called Bodo's Your Way Through Life about masculinity, where we talked about if you look at these women saying they want this much money or this height and this and that, and you line up all those stats and you actually calculate the percentage chance of how many men in the population actually make that up, it's the numbers will blow your mind. It's
Yeah,
insane.
the number of women looking for that guy and how many of that guy actually exists, it's yeah, you're basically just destroying your chances of ever being in a relationship, right? For those women. Yeah.
Right. And
Luckily, I
and
check all those boxes, so I'm not worried. But um,
Andrew's good looking, he's funny, he's
over 6 foot
self-employed,
tall, yeah,
slight British
that's right.
accent, speaks multiple languages.
What can I say? I won the lottery when I was born. Yeah.
Wow. All right. Perfect. So, well, you know what? I'll tie this into a personal question then, Andrew. You help
Yep.
other men with their self-esteem, but have you yourself personally struggled? You just said, you're this perfect man, but we always know that a perfect man on the outside isn't always perfect on the inside or at home. So, can you tell us a little bit about your personal journey through life, especially,
Yeah.
or your younger adolescent years are going to be your quarter life crisis, so to speak?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I'm far from perfect. Far. I will admit that I've done a lot of work on myself for the last, I would say 4 years, solid 4 to 5 years. Prior to that, though, my life was a crapshoot. I was very insecure. I had a lot of very bad coping mechanisms. And part of my journey has been to uncover some of the sources of that.
Mm.
Um, Mistreatment by teachers in school, bullying, um, accidental, situations of the way I was parented, perhaps, or, unintentional. I mean, like, not to put any shade on my
Right.
parents at all. They did a great job. They did the best with the tools they had. Looking back, I can learn maybe better ways of doing things, but all of that basically added up to a very insecure young man who just turned to drugs and alcohol basically to compensate for his self-perceived lacks until I got sober 3 years ago, 3 years and 2 months ago. Until that point, I was a mess, but thanks to counseling and therapy, and then some really, really great coaches and mentors, I've in the last 5 years gone from single, desperate, alone, alcoholic to married, sober, 3 kids, living in a very nice neighborhood with a good job and the very grateful position to be able to help other guys to get through what they're going through. So a complete turnaround in the last 5 years, and that's what I stand on when people say, well, like, who are you to help others? It's like, well, this is where I was and this is where I am. Like, that's it, really. Take it or leave it.
I think that's amazing. And you mentioned helping other men, and so I kind of hinted at the Extraordinary Men's Network. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about that while we're on the subject?
Yeah, sure. It kind of started as a big project for coaching on a grand scale, and it's just I haven't been able to, I don't believe, reach those expectations because I am a full-time father and a full-time teacher,
Right.
and I'm trying to be a full-time coach. That's just too many full times, right?
Right.
Um, However, I started it, and it's the goal still persists that it's a safe community for men to be their authentic self, vulnerable selves, and share their journey, their triumphs, their struggles, their pains with other men who are either going through the same thing or who have been through that and can share their inspiration and motivate each other to get through, because there's times where as a man, and this speaks to masculinity, where we can't, or many times we feel like we shouldn't admit that we're struggling, right?
Right.
So, and I believe that for me, my greatest breakthroughs came when I heard another man. It could be a woman too, but for me, I resonated with when these men shared what they've gone through and where they are now. And it's like, wow, like, did you read my diary? Like, how did you know I did
Right.
that? And where are you now? Like, you got what job now, and what family situation are you in? It's like, oh man, like maybe so at the time, I was thinking maybe I could do it too, right?
Mm.
Maybe there's a way out of this for me. Listen more, be inspired. And I'm like, okay, so I want to create a community where other guys can get that because I realized all my life, until that point, so 40 years, I thought that didn't exist. And even when it was suggested to me, I was like, no, I don't. I live in Korea. I was like, no, I don't think that exists here. Guess what? It did. But
Wow.
I was just blinded and kind of ignorant to that idea that it would be here. Um, so that community existed offline, and I wanted to create an online version of it, basically. And it's proven to be of need. We have over 600 men, and they're from all over the world, from pretty much every continent, I think now. Yeah.
Me
So
included.
it's
But
definitely says to be it seems to be wanted and needed, and I'm trying to do my best to make it valuable to people.
and we'll have the links in the description below for that. It is a Facebook
Thank
group
you.
that you can join and then watch the interviews, share some stuff. And now, Andrew, if you don't mind sharing with us, did you attend any AA meetings in your life when you were battling with sobering up?
Not until I decided I want to be sober.
Mm.
I, being from the UK, and I didn't even, I've met people in AA from the UK. I guess it was just the neighborhood I grew up in, or the family I come from. It wasn't even on the table. I didn't know it was a real thing. Like I thought I've seen it in
Okay.
movies, I've seen it in dramas. I was like, either
Right.
it's just an American thing or it's just something that is, played up in TV, media. So when my counselor actually recommended it, like, you're not, if you don't stop drinking, if you don't get sober, you're not going to really know why you feel the way you feel. Like I was having huge
Mm.
anger issues at the time. He's like, you want to know why you're angry? Least you got to do is stop drinking because alcohol clouds your judgment so much and misinforms you
Right.
of what's going on. I was like, well, how can I do that? At the time, for many years, I'd say I wouldn't even live here if I couldn't drink. Why would I live in Korea if I couldn't drink? To mean that one of the biggest benefits of being here is how cheap alcohol is and how good the party scene was. So that's
Mm.
how ignorant I was, how foolish I was in my thoughts about that. But after he said it, maybe 24 hours later, I Googled it and I found that there was an AA meeting down the road from me. And I ended up actually attending a Zoom meeting because COVID was just, kicking off. And for a while, I did some Zoom meetings. But yeah, I have for 3 years been in AA and I've been to many meetings in Seoul.
And can you speak about that? Because you mentioned earlier the benefit of hearing other men and their success and what they went through. And my father, he goes to AA and he just can't get the benefit of it. He goes there, he's like, it just makes me so angry and want to drink hearing all of these negative stories. And I try to explain to him the perspective is you're supposed to hear about what they lost and how they realize what they lost and their reflections on it and learn from that as well as relate. A lot of people have the same stories of what they lost or about themselves. And so a lot of people get this negative perception of AA. They think it's a support group, but then they go and they're like, this is just, a pity
Where's the
party.
support?
Right.
I mean, I get that, and I've had those feelings too. Not very often, and it's down to it's down to me, and it's down to I believe in extreme ownership. I love that book. I love the philosophy of it. It's down to me to own what I get out of that meeting. And a big message that I got out of the literature and the philosophy of AA is about acceptance, tolerance, patience, love. If you go to a meeting and you hear complaining all the time, you're not accepting and being tolerant, right? Like, of
Mm,
course they're complaining. They're drinking themselves to death. What else are they supposed to do?
right.
Um, some people just have to complain a few times. Some people never. They just listen and get the message. Everyone's takes a different road
Mm,
and different schedule to recovery. Some people unfortunately never recover. Um, I can't speak to what it is that gives your father such a bad experience of it. I have heard that some meetings just aren't run well. Maybe he just needs to try another venue.
right.
Um, so it's a it's a group of highly functioning drinkers trying to organize a recovery session. Like, it's a
Right.
miracle that it's lasted. I think it's 89 years this year. 87. It's in the 80s anyway.
Right.
Of AA running, and it's been run by drunks for all that time,
Right.
right?
And
Started with two men, one drunk trying to help another drunk. What do you think's going to happen? You expect it to
right.
be smooth sailing and like all
Well,
equal and hunky dory? No. So we do our
there's
best
there's
with
the,
what we
there's
have.
the UK in you. Hunky dory. There's the UK in you. I guess Korea
It's
hasn't
a it's a
completely taken over your dialect.
to me it's a miracle that it exists even the way it is. It's not always perfect, but it's amazing
Right.
that it does what it does for so many people.
Oh yeah, and I think my dad has this mindset, like some other people who attend AA or NA or whatever it may be, that it's one and done, or a few meetings and you're good for life. Because I remember he came home and told me a story. He goes, Mr. Whiskey, why is this 70-year-old man going to AA? He hasn't drank in 20 years, and he's still coming to these meetings sharing whatever he has, listening to whoever. It's ridiculous. And I try to explain it to my dad. And I had a whole episode about AA and alcoholism and recovery and getting our addicted loved ones to want to seek help. And one of the things we talked about is it's always in there. And it may become a dormant gene or idea or whatever causes you to want to drink, whatever you're addicted to, but it's a demon always training in the corner, always wanting to
Yep.
take over, right? And so that man acknowledges his limits. I remember the guest I had, Dr. Brian, he was talking about, I don't know if it was one of his patients or a friend, but he said he hadn't done coke in decades. But he said, I cannot guarantee you that if you put a line of Coke in front of me right now, that I wouldn't do it if I was allowed to. A lot of alcoholics get this mindset. It's just a drop, or it's just, my dad likes to say, it's
Hmm.
just wine, it's not vodka, you know. But he's missing out and he thinks that AA is a miracle pill. That
Yeah.
you only go to a few sessions and then they set you straight for life. It's not get you better. It's not a rehabilitation center. It's a support group, like you said. And so I think that's part of the issue he has with that is wanting these instantaneous results. Like I'm no longer addicted. I went to AA and I'm no longer addicted. I think that's some of the misconceptions people have.
One of the things I realized after a year or so of sobriety was what a walking cliche I was. Like, as I read more
Mm,
literature and I read more stories of people's recovery, like, how many times did I say that? It's just wine. It's not vodka. It's just beer. It's not soju. It's it's just one drink, it's not five. And it's just like
Right.
justifications and rationalizations, and everyone does it, and everyone goes through that. I feel like every alcoholic has some version of the same journey
Right.
that they until they accept that, that you can't make much progress. So
Yeah.
hopefully, in your dad's lifetime, he gets that awareness. He'd be like, yeah, I said that. Wow, son, how many times did I say that? That's what
Right.
a fool I was. And
Every holiday.
I
It's a holiday.
yeah, it's three
There's
o'clock
too many
somewhere, right?
holidays. There's so many holidays now.
It's got to be a national holiday somewhere in the world. It's 5 p.m.
Right.
somewhere.
Right.
It's my birthday or whatever. Yeah,
Right.
I have
So,
so many reasons, so many reasons. Now I for me it's I've had those thoughts too. Like, why don't I just drink again? And I have friends who are adamant that I'm going to drink again. And for me, I just have to keep telling them it's like it's not worth it. I look at where I was,
right.
and if there's any chance at all I could lose what I have, I'm not going to drink.
Right. Now you have a
Do I feel
family
like I could
too.
drink again without getting drunk or not, without getting belligerent or blackout or whatever? Yeah, possibly, but not for very long. 1 week, a couple of days, maybe. But sooner rather than later, I'll be back where I was, and I don't want to be there. So
Mm.
it's not worth losing what I've got in terms of my career, my family, my kids. Yeah. So
Right.
that's my
And
reason for
now
not drinking.
and that's very respectable. Now, tying it all back to the beginning, when I asked you to define masculinity, we've covered a lot of different facets of it,
Mhm.
but masculinity itself, I guess even if you can tell us where you started in terms of what you thought masculinity was and where you've ended, if running the Extraordinary Men Network or if, coaching these men has changed that, has impacted that for you, or if being a father and a husband has impacted that for you.
Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint, when things changed and pivoted, but I definitely grew up with the idea that masculinity was about physical strength, about holding back your emotions, kind of stoic, out strong on the outside. Men don't cry. Things just bounce off you. Like nothing bothers you. You're like Iron Man, whatever. You're the Hulk. You bounce through, push through every struggle you have, everything that you overcome all your challenges through brute force if you have to, and that's masculinity. That's a real man. And I guess it was having a good role model. My father, to his bad luck or whatever, I had a lot of health issues in my late teens, and I got to see a man who was very humble in his with his illnesses. Like, he was a police officer, he was a
Mhm.
successful businessman after that, and then he pretty much had to lose it all due to health reasons. And ask him many times, like, don't you regret having kids or regret doing that? And he's like, no, I don't regret any of it because it got me to where I am here. Like, I have four great kids, and yeah, four, four great kids, and my great wife, and yeah, I'm sick, and I have these back problems and heart problems, but you know, it got me to where I am. And he would cry sometimes, and it's like that's a that's what a man is. That's what a man can be. Someone who can admit where they are and accept where they are and vulnerably share what they've been through, and knowing that it helped me to res respect him more made me reassess what masculinity was. Like, masculinity is knowing yourself, being true to yourself, your own values and your own beliefs, not, you know, not kowtowing or bending to other people's expectations of you. Like, doing the work to know yourself and being true to that. That's a big part of masculinity for me. The men that I respect, that's what they demonstrate to me.
Speaking of
So
like men you respect, do you have any role models out in the celebrity world or business world that you look up to as well-rounded men that you kind of are inspired by at all?
does anyone know my Uncle John? Um, my mentor, Joseph McClendon III, is an incredible man, honest, vulnerable, a powerhouse of knowledge and experience, and just totally authentic. So, and he's in that picture up there. When was that? It was my graduation for coaching, but it was his 70th birthday as well. He's just such an amazing guy. And his partner and mentor, Tony Robbins, as well, is as like more on the celebrity end of this. Like he's a celebrity, but I'm grateful to know him. But Tony Robbins, I would say, is one of my strongest mentors or inspirations for what a man is. Like to when he tells his stories of his struggle and what he's been through, and he sheds a tear on stage, and it's like there's a man, right? Like when you think of him,
Right.
like he's like 7 foot tall and built like the side of a house, and he's on stage, bawling his eyes out, when his parents died, or when he had no money to feed his own kids and stuff like that. It's like, okay, that's a man. You can admit where you were wrong. You can put the work in to fix what you've done wrong. That's that's masculinity.
Yeah. And so I know if we want to talk to some great men, you have your network that you're running. And
Hmm.
like I said, links in the description below for that. And where do you see kind of the future going with that, or where do you want it to be? I know you have a lot that you're trying to take care of, full-time husband, full-time father, full-time teacher,
Hmm.
full-time coach. So doing a lot of things there.
Yeah, I just want it to be of benefit to as many people as possible. And I want to create the time for me to be able to do that. And one of the things I think is going to do that is leaning more into my coaching business. So I see myself working more in my coaching and helping men privately one to one. And then that will fund, support me because my community is free. There's no charge to be a part of that community. And to be realistic, I have to have a source of income that substitutes that, right? That allows for that to happen. I don't want to just run a paid community. That's not what I'm trying to do because I want it to be accessible to
Right.
everyone. Not to say that there wouldn't be some avenue later that, there could be a paid aspect of it. But for now, my goal is to have one-to-one coaching clients, and that will allow me to free up some time to focus on that community and do that for free and provide all the content and help for people who want it through that community. So my goal is to grow the community, to reach more people, to have more leaders join the community who want to, be of service and help those who are in need of it. That's the foreseeable future for that. Some people see it as there's like a competition. Like there's a lot of men's groups out there right now. It's a like as you said, there's so many areas of masculinity that are in debate, femininity and toxic masculinity, and of course there's a lot of support groups popping up now. And I've talked to people who have those groups, and they don't want to talk to me because they fear like I'm trying to steal their clients or something.
Right.
I'm like, dude, you can join my group and talk about your group in my group. Like if your group helps men, you should be in my group so that you can tout it, right? Like, don't you want to reach more
Right.
people? Isn't that the game we're in here where we're trying to help as many people as possible? And I get rejected left and right because I don't know what it comes down to for them, but if anyone's watching and has their own, men's community, there's no competition on my side. Like you can come into my group, introduce your group, please introduce your group because maybe your group is going to provide, your community is going to provide something for the men in Extraordinary Men's Network that I can't or I'm not currently offering. And I want everyone to have all the help they can get. So I hope that is not a barrier for people joining because I don't see any competition, just teamwork.
Right. And so at the time of this recording, it hasn't happened, but by the time this episode is out, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure the date, so Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, you will have already published the He Said, She Said event. If you want to tell us about that, so we can go check that out.
Yeah, I hope so. It's now a week delayed. Basically, technical issues and live streaming into Facebook groups is a problem at the moment, so we've had to postpone it. This time next week, so first week of August, it could have happened, depending on when this has gone live. But
Right.
I run a community called Extraordinary Men's Network, and then I have some peers who run their own women's groups, the Empowered Women's Network and the Women's Wellness Network. So the original spark was between them and me to say, okay, let's join our networks together so that the
Right.
men can talk to the women and the women can talk to the men and we can share our group knowledge and get questions answered. So the idea being that men can post their questions, one of the ones that's been asked a lot is, do you want us to be emotionally vulnerable? Like, do you want us to cry in front of you? Because a lot of guys are confused, like they don't know what their women want, right? Could they handle a vulnerable man, or do they
I don't
want
know. I don't
a
know if women know what they want.
typical? Well, I'm not sure if any of us know what we want until we try.
Yeah,
But that's one of the common questions: is do
right.
you want a vulnerable man? Because some women will be honest and be like, no, I don't want a man who's going to cry. I want a man who's going to come home and, well, yeah, do what he does, but
Right.
be the head of the house and lead the way, and and that's fine if that's what they want. But to get those answers from the horse's mouth, like I think most people want people to be true and authentic and honest. That's what most people want. But that's the idea of the show. The women have their own questions for the men. Um, I don't know what they are yet. I'm excited to find out.
Yeah, I'm
So
excited
either
too.
yes, it either it will have happened, it has happened, and it was awesome. Check the replay, or it's still going to happen.
Right.
And in which case, come and join us live and ask your own questions.
Oh yeah, if it has happened, I'll have the link below so y'all can check that out. Because I just wanted, I do have women listeners, and so I didn't want them to feel left out, so they could go check that
Yeah.
out and
And there's
find a
also
group
the
for
Victory
them.
Network and Brain to Belly. Our
Yeah,
friend Yoyoi
Yayoi
Kamiyama,
Kamiyama, one of my favorite friends.
her community is also involved now. So it's grown beyond just the
Yeah,
he said, she said. It's we said, they said, I suppose now. But yeah, the
oh
original
yeah,
premise was that an open dialogue between men and women.
yeah. That's how I found out about it. The lovely Yayoi. I follow her on Facebook and check out all her posts, and I saw that I was like, oh, there's Andrew, and they arranged it, ladies and gentlemen, where they have like they each have their own like photo on the wall, but it's like them live in the photo. It was pretty
Mm-hmm.
cool. It was pretty awesome. It was like set up like a group meeting. And I just want to bring that up for all my women listening to this show right now, wives, daughters, single women, whoever it may be. And I was trying to think if I had any men that I really look up to.
Mm.
And my generation, we have some interesting men who are kind of big on social media. Some of them
Can
are
I ask you a
toxic.
question? What is your generation? Sorry.
I don't
You're
even
such an
know.
enigma to me.
I
Are you
believe
30? Are
I'm
you 50? Are you
Gen
20? I
Thank you,
have no
thank you.
idea what generation you are.
I believe I've been told I'm Gen Z. I thought I was a millennial, and then someone said, "No, Mr. Whiskey, you're a Gen Z." And I was like, "Oh, well,
You're a
I'm
Zoomer,
sorry
eh?
to hear that. I really don't like that generation and the stuff they do. But I also don't like alphas." And I was like, millennials are I want to be a boomer, to be honest. That's my personality. I wish I was a boomer.
Yeah,
I'm one of
right.
those people who says I'm born in the wrong time, but which
Hmm.
is funny because everything I do is so technology based. But I'd rather be wearing a full suit, talking in old English, doing I don't know whatever people would do, but playing croquet. But yeah, anyway, I was thinking, and I remembered one of the men that really surprised me, a guest on my show. So this is a shameless plug, but America's number one ranked survivalist, 6 times Naked and Afraid champion, EJ Snyder, over 20 years military service. He is America's number one ranked survivalist. He is, if you look at him, huge, strong, terrifying, cold gaze. There's a picture of him with an alligator he killed over him. Like he is a powerful man. Survival knowledge can live with nothing but garbage from your trash can. And there's pictures of him climbing mountains, and he's in his 60s, and he could beat up most of us. But I had him on the show. Funny, super caring, super charismatic, vulnerable, emotional man. He's completely well balanced. And he said he was kind of forced to by society because when you're such a big, intimidating guy, you have to be extra, big hearted so that people aren't as afraid of you. But
Hmm.
either way, he surprised me so much. One of the most well rounded men I know. And watching him on the show, Naked and Afraid, or just seeing his pictures online or his home defense commercials, you would have never guessed it. And on top of that, one of the things he said is, as men, we need to support each other, that and that we're tribal. And so I just remembered him when you were talking about yours because I thought about my generation. I was thinking David Goggins is a big one that a lot
Mm.
of my friends and I like and don't like. We say, well, we don't want him to influence the youth to hurt themselves. By doing what he did, he ended up getting a lot of injuries, especially internally. I listened to one of his interviews, running 80 to 100 miles at a time, pissing blood and all this stuff. And, our concern is our young men taking that and thinking they're invincible and getting hurt or saying we got to get hurt to be like David
Yeah.
Goggins. I think there's lessons to be
You're not a
learned
real
there.
man unless you can piss blood and run 100 miles.
Right.
Okay.
And I think the lesson there that David Goggins is really trying to give is about perseverance, not being lazy, overcoming, right? He's not saying go out there and do what I do, but he's saying do the things I did personality wise, mindset wise, and this and that, however your training may be. Like one of the things I did like that I've listened to, he said a lot of people when they were training in the military, they wish the instructors would say, all right, we're calling it an early day, or that the water was warm, or that the run was short. And he says, I don't wish for that stuff. I hope that the water's cold, that instructors beat us double, that we run further. He wants to be pushed, especially a lot of us don't have the self-discipline to push ourselves. But when you're
Yeah.
in the military and they're telling you to do something like that, it's a good accountability system. But yeah, I was
Mm.
thinking of him and then not so popular. I haven't really watched a lot of his content, so I'm not going to make an opinion officially, couple of nukes or Mr. Whiskey wise, but Andrew Tate was a big name being thrown around. He's kind of quieted down now, but a lot of men really liked his mindset on masculinity and life and that. So I was just trying to think of like from my generation, because I've heard Tony Robbins a lot from you, Yayoi, Steve Wright, but all of y'all are a little bit older than I am. And so
Yeah, that's true.
when you said that name, I recognized it, but I don't. And I think a lot of people in certain industries know him. But I think if you
Mm.
went out and interviewed a bunch of Gen Zs, they would say, who's that?
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
That makes sense.
but yeah, that's what I was just thinking of in terms of when you think masculinity, two very masculine guys are David Goggins and Andrew Tate that I see a lot on social media. They're very big on, and by social media, not them particularly, but clips of them, people saying what they said. And about a year ago, there was a huge phase where I'm not sure if you're familiar with this word, Andrew, but it's called Sigma. And it was the mindset that, like masculine man, like stoic, super cool guy, ladies man, all this and that. And a lot of people were referencing the main character from American Psycho, and that a lot of young men want to be just like him. A
Without the
lot.
murdering, hopefully.
Well, that maybe, I don't know. That's what I'm saying when I just thinking about some
Yeah,
of the
that's
masculine influences of my generation, and then of course, I guess some of the celebrities that they look up to, maybe like Ryan Reynolds, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, Hugh Jackman. That's like you said, a lot of people still associate masculinity with strength or at least looking huge, which all those guys do. I mean, all those guys are jacked.
mm.
But yeah, I just brought it to mind because I was like, do I have any male role models that I look up to? And I wouldn't say famous wise, not really. I'm inspired by a lot of the men I interview, like you. Steve Wright is a great guy. Check
Yes.
out that episode I had with him. He's amazing. Or like I said, Ricky D. Sluter, EJ Snyder. I've had a bunch of wonderful men on who aren't celebrities, but they're doing their own thing in their own community and expanding it every day. And to me, they're the real men. They're the extraordinary men.
Yeah, that's what's affected me mostly actually since starting the community is all of the incredible men that I've met who would never have crossed my path, right?
Right.
Especially those from different continents and those from different cultural backgrounds. I never have met them and heard their story. And just to see how much similarity there is between us all is one thing, but also, yeah, to get the inspiration and lessons learned from them is just phenomenal.
Right.
Yeah, I'm so grateful to have this opportunity to be interviewed by you. Is another amazing opportunity, to interview them, to interview you. You've been in the community, you've been interviewed. But I wouldn't have imagined even this time last year that I would have spoken to so many incredible examples of men.
Same,
So
same.
I'm
Just a
very
year
grateful for
ago
that.
for me as well. And like you said, different continents. I met people from. It's crazy. I never thought that I would be friends with people from Korea, from the UK, all over the place. Even being
Yep.
military formerly,
Mhm.
meeting people. And that is one of the things I want to ask you, Andrew. The final one of the final questions here. I know a lot about Korean culture as far as women go because I follow K-pop idols and the women singing groups, which is a
I
different
don't know if they're a
segment.
good example of
But yeah, that's
Korean
totally
women.
different. But what I want to ask is I don't know
I can get
much
my wife
about
to come
the
in if you want.
no 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 no. I want to ask about the Korean culture on men in South Korea and how that has
Mm.
impacted your life at all because you moved, obviously you teach English and all that, but I'm not sure their views on masculinity compared to the UK and even UK compared to America. It's different everywhere we go,
Mm.
and how that impacted you at all. If Korean culture has changed your mindset at all. I mean, you're living as a Korean essentially.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're not. I don't know how you live, but if you've really changed your life to that culture, I'm assuming is your wife from Korea or
Yeah. So my wife's Korean, born and raised, Korean parents, all that. Yeah, Korean
okay.
lineage.
So you're
So
pretty
my kids
integrated
are
then.
British Korean. I've been here 20 years, and sometimes when I'm talking to my students, they're like, "Well, you're more Korean than me," or they say things like, "Well, you're almost Korean," and I just look at them like, "I'll never be Korean." Not that I don't wouldn't want to be. It's just I'll always be
Yeah.
in my mind. I'll always be British. Like I'm just a British guy, you know. To talk about Korean masculinity and the differences, or have I adapted to it or whatever? I think it's served me well that I'm a British man and I have British values, and
Mm,
I live the way I live as a Brit, because I was raised in the UK, because we're different, and the women, the mothers, I teach all age groups, from young girls, elementary school age to, my main job is university age women. I work at a women's university, and I teach, middle
huh.
age and women in their 60s and 70s. So I think it's served me well that I'm not a Korean man, because how am I different? I think I don't want to say particularly. However, I would say stereotypically, right? Korean men are the old-fashioned masculinity that we mentioned
Mm,
earlier. They keep their emotions hid. They lead their household. They in public they tell their wives what to do. They lead their family. They make all the decisions. They earn all the money. They don't have much to do with their kids. They don't change diapers. They don't feed their babies. They don't even know what their kids' hobbies are. Probably they go to work early. They come home late from work.
yeah. Sounds
Um,
like my dad that he
that's
had
what it
never
used to be
changed my
like.
diaper. Yeah.
Yeah, these days they're much more on par with Western expectations of men. COVID did a lot to help. They didn't have to go to work, so they realized, oh, being at home is actually nice. A lot of men realize that being a family man is nice. They realize there's great benefits to spending time with their kids and getting to know their kids, getting back there intimacy with their partner, maybe things like that. To me, it was amazing how many parents slept in separate bedrooms. You know, how many
Wow.
women would talk about their husbands like they're talking about their brother, and not in a not an incestual
Ooh.
way.
I live in
Like
the South, so I my mind went my mind
no,
immediately
like a
went
platonic
there.
relationship, like we're business partners raising these kids, and it's like, wow, that
Yeah.
sucks. Like, why would you want to be in that? And I guess I can't imagine it if I don't live it, but that's the way they went. Like they get married and they have all this intimacy and passion for each other. Then they have
Mm.
kids, and it's like, well, I have to now go to work and put all my energy and emotions and focus on earning for my family. I don't have time for you when I get home. And the wife's been,
Right.
exhausted all day taking care of the kids. That when by the time the husband comes home, the last thing she wants to do is get sexy. So
Right.
yeah, they sleep in separate rooms so they can have a good night's sleep. And I get why it happened. I feel my natural reaction is to feel bad for them. Like
Mm.
I put a lot of effort in to make sure that my wife and I get time together and don't let the kids get in the way too much, because that's
Right.
important to me. And that I think that's one thing that helps is that we're so different. We contrast each other so much that we are constantly like kind of in flux. Like we don't get
I get
stuck
what
in
you're
a
saying.
pattern because we're constantly interrupting each other's patterns, if you like. Her Korean way of doing things and my British way of doing things are constantly different. That we keep each other entertained, or
Yeah.
whatever
Sometimes she
it's like.
interrupts your 12 o'clock tea time.
That's right. I'm trying to have my 11s, trying to have my cup of tea. And she's like, we changed the diaper, honey. Sorry, darling, I'm having my tea. And
That's
I
funny.
get
I always
slapped
make
in the
that
face
same
with a
joke
with a
to
wet diaper. And I should say nappy. It's a nappy, by the way, not a diaper. A wet
mm.
nappy in the face. And then I
Is
go
that
to the bedroom and
British or
change.
Korean? Nappy. Is
That's
that British or
British.
Korean? Okay. I never.
Yeah.
That's interesting. A nappy.
A
Is it because they
nappy.
wear it when they nap?
Nope. That's what they wear 24/7 when
Well,
their
yeah,
baby's
I know
nappies.
that. I understand how. Thank you, Andrew. I
It's what
understand
I
how
wear
that
when I take a nap now. No, I'm just kidding.
not yet, but when you have your
No, nappy.
pushback
I don't
midlife
know where it comes
crisis,
from.
that's interesting. I'll have
I
to
bet
look
it's
that
either
up.
French or French or Greek, some Latin. They'll have some etymology in Old English.
Yeah,
Nap. So
interesting.
Google it, guys.
Yeah. Well, I've got a couple things to say, some funny, some not so funny. Uh First off, Andrew, that's very interesting. You work with all women all day and then you go home and you work with just men. So you kind of got like two worlds. You got your world of femininity and you got your world of masculinity.
That's right. Yeah.
You live the he said, she said. You live yeah, both
Yeah.
sides. So very
Yeah.
interesting.
I've ended up with two daughters and my wife. Luckily, my stepson is around a fair bit, but he's 17, so he's pretty grown up. But
Mm,
I definitely have a lot of femininity in my life. I've got four
yeah.
sisters as well.
Well, hopefully you will have a son on the way in the future
Oh God,
sometime
don't say
soon.
that. Oh my God, my wife would kill me. No, no, no more children for us.
Oh,
Son-in-law would be fine. Grandson, sure, I welcome that
okay,
eventually, 30 years later. But no,
yeah.
no,
Right.
no more. This is the last round of nappy changing for me and her.
No mini Andrew then, but yeah. Oh, I was gonna say, at least they're married. When I asked out a woman and she said, "Oh, you're like a brother to me," I didn't get any financial support. I didn't get any meals. I didn't get any even mild, boring intimacy. I got nothing. I just got, "You're like a brother to me. You're my guardian angel, my protector." And then I got the, you know, a couple months later, "Oh, he hit me," or "We broke up. You were right. You're so smart. I want to marry a man just like you." So yeah,
Oh man,
at least at
you want to
least
marry your brother?
yeah,
Hmm.
I should have hit her with that. Yeah, I
Yeah, right.
guess if that's the case, might as well
It's
marry me then.
it's
But
interesting. I just had a conversation with a good friend at the weekend about, well, say conversation. He was teaching me on what he's been reading recently about,
mm,
why couples work and why some couples don't. Same-sex marriages, apparently lesbian marriages have one of the highest divorce rates at the moment. Um, but that wasn't the main point. The main point was like, why do some women like these kind of men, and why do some men like these kind of women, and just the intricacies of how some relationships work and many don't.
yeah,
The
and that
What
sounds
people think they
interesting.
want and what they really need can often be very different.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of snippets of a couple of different things. I was watching on Netflix, not a sponsor, Love is Blind, and the one guy brought up a certain book he read where it was why opposites attract and why they work, and that the more indifferent they are, the more perfect they are as a couple. Whereas I've seen people preach the opposite. Sigmund Freud and some of his theories and works, to summarize, men want to date women like their mother,
Right.
and daughters want to date uh men like their father. I actually find a lot of truth in those theories. I've seen it happen a lot of times, and I've also seen some other things with it, whether I've seen it always,
Mm.
men want to date someone who's like their mother because they had a bad relationship with their mother. I've seen it, men want to date
Yes.
someone like their mother because they love their mother. I've seen it where their mother was just taught them what a woman was, and that's what they're comfortable with. Whether it's toxic or
Yeah.
not. I've had episodes on my show talking about toxic marriages leading to toxic relationships among their children because they seek the same thing because that's what they were taught was normal. That relationships is a
Yes.
whole, episode on its own. What's funny though is I
Yeah.
did see a clip of the other day about lesbian couples, and it was a woman expressing her frustrations because it came down to we're both women, who's gonna pay, who's gonna do this, who's gonna do that, and a lot of fighting over that. Because she had uh the main woman who was telling the story said this woman acted like a spoiled princess the whole time and wanted me to do this, and that. And she goes, "I finally understand men." She goes, "After dating a woman, I only ever want to be with men." I finally understand them.
Apparently, yeah, apparently
She put
that's
herself in our
yeah.
shoes. Yeah.
Even when you're the same gender, apparently this is what the interviews and the data has said that
Don't quote Mr. Whiskey or Andrew on this.
no, no,
They're
no. Yeah,
we're
this is
quoting
just from the data.
studies.
The
Quote the
data
studies. Yeah.
suggests, right? The data suggests that in all relationships there needs to be a feminine and a masculine. There needs to be the protector and the nurturer, right? Whether it's two women or two men, and apparently just in these same gender relationships, both refuse to be, the one they don't, well, the one that's natural to their gender. So I guess in the lesbian relationships, they both want to be nurtured. They both want to be cared for, protected.
Right. Like
right?
like the example I
Eventually,
just
they
gave.
don't start
Yeah.
off that way, but they end up that way. But to men, I guess maybe it's the same. They both want to be the dominant one, right? Neither of
Right.
them wants to be, the homemaker nurturer type. I don't know if that's true. That's just what the data is
Right. Well,
as
and
hinted at. But
to protect us from being canceled politically, right? I mean, we never talk in 100% absolutes. I mean, there's
no,
always going to be outliers, different examples, but there is a majority of cases, and it's certainly an interesting study. And I lost my train of thought with the Korean culture. So I did think it was interesting
yes,
that you work with women all day and men all evening. And I said, oh, I want to tell a story. This is an interesting story about my father. Bragged that he never changed my diaper to the point that the one single time where my mother wasn't around because she took care of us primarily, classic traditional family. But the one time she wasn't around, my father drove down the street to his best friend and had his best friend's wife change my diaper because he so believed that it was only a woman's role to change diapers and that he would never, ever be so shamed and
mm,
humiliated to change his firstborn son's diaper, only son's
wow,
diaper. And just an interesting story. I laugh at it. Originally, I cried at it. I didn't actually
mm,
cry, but it's like, okay, Dad, wow. But he also is he's always been a man who has held every responsibility of a parent over our head.
hmm,
I pay all the bills, I feed you, I this and that. You should be grateful that I do this. I'm the potter, you're the clay. Can't complain how the vase is made. He bragged about how he only had to pick us up this many times throughout a whole high school from the bus stop, and how he was in a competition with no one but himself to be the least parenting parent and just be the only fun parent. But that's a whole conversation on its own. It's an interesting mindset when it comes. It's a masculine mindset in terms of like traditional masculinity, but my father's also his own case because he has a lot of other stuff going on in addition to masculinity and older mindsets. He also has narcissism, alcoholism, drug abuse, sexual
mm,
immorality, addictions, and religious weaponization. There's a whole lot going on over there. So,
wow.
there's been snippets across the show. Andrew and I have talked about my book I'm working on. It's going to cover that in a lot more detail. But Mr. Andrews, as we come to a close here, is there anything you want to leave us with?
To wrap it up, like the very first question you said about masculinity, and I said about being true to yourself and knowing yourself. I recently heard about this idea of people talk a lot about self care, and this came from Mark Manson, the guy who wrote the book The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And he said people got the wrong idea about what self care is. They think it's ordering a pizza on a Friday night and it's self care. It's
Mm,
taking a long bath because I deserve it. I worked hard. He said no. Self care should be having self discipline. And this
mm,
goes back to what you said about David Goggins. It's not you don't have to run 100 miles of piss blood, but knowing that if you do that extra rep at the gym when you feel tired, you are making yourself stronger. That's the care you need to give yourself. Self discipline is self care, not overindulging because you had a hard day. It's mastering self discipline that is true self care.
and it should
Other
be
things.
something that's continual in your life, not an occasional
Yeah, it's
reward
not a
or
one and
cheat day
done.
or earn
No.
day. It's something, self-care is something you should be working on every day through subtle and smaller actions, not some big kind of outlier event. It should be, like you said, that self-discipline. I mean, it's good to reward yourself, but that shouldn't be your self-care. Self-care should
Mm.
be, like you said, self-discipline, like washing your face every day when you wake up, brushing your teeth every day, like you said, doing your
Doing what you
workout
don't
every
want to do.
day. And we've spoken before about confidence in the gym, and it's not about motivation, it's about discipline. And that goes for anything in life, whether it's work or whatever. Motivation wavers. And Andrew, as a podcaster, you know that sometimes when we go for a period of time without interviews, our social battery suddenly shrinks, and it's
Yeah.
like, oh, I don't want to do this. Or it's been the saying for decades. The more you do, the more you want to do. The less you do, the less you want to do. Self-discipline
Yes.
is you're gonna do it, whether you
Mm-hmm.
is not about more or less or whether you want to. Whereas motivation comes and goes. There's days you wake up, you're like, I don't feel like going to the gym, and there's so many factors that affect it. Self-discipline is having that I'm going to do it. So I like that
Yeah.
tying self-care to self-discipline. And I think that's something great to leave us with. So again, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to reach out to Andrew, we will have his Facebook as well as his face group, the Extraordinary Men's Network, in the description below. Andrew, did you have a personal website you wanted to plug at all?
I do not just no, my coaching handle, is that a thing? What is that the right word? I don't know.
It's
OG
not a
coach
gamer
on
tag.
Facebook. It's not a gamer tag, no, but I go by ordinary guy coach or OG coach. That's the only other thing. But Andrew Michael Houghton on Facebook and Extraordinary Men's Network are the two main ways to get in touch with me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Andrew. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me, Mr. Whiskey. Been a pleasure.
Sailing through the ocean blue, nuclear reactors my crew, guiding the ship, the stars as our guide, through the waves we ride, jokes and laughter fill the air. On this voyage we have to share, working together, side by side, as one family we will abide. In the heart of the ship we reside, nuclear operators with pride, powering the vessel with every stride. Our mission, a source of great pride.